Welcome back to Social Distillation, the submarine still of the internet, where we attempt to pour white lightning straight onto your brain. And I wish I could pour the white lightning straight into my mouth, because we're going to follow up on the Wheel of Time now that it's out. And I've watched all 4 episodes that are out, and I need a drink.
Yeah, we'll follow up on that first of all, partly because it's probably our most popular episode yet, at least from a looking at the analytics from people getting onto it from a search term versus us sharing it. So it's all people that are new to us, new to how we view the world, and we got some pretty good feedback in the comments too. So I'm not very good about keeping up with comments, but I've been trying really hard to at least answer everybody. At least to this point. Maybe one day we'll be popular enough I can't answer anybody, but it's not today. So I did my best. But I also got some rebuttals. I did reply in the comments, but I would like to talk about them today as well as go over those first 4 episodes. So again, ahead of time, spoiler alerts, we are going to talk about the episode all up through episode 4, and also things in the book. So if you have not read the books, please do that before watching, or know that you'll at least have some insight going forward. And same for the show. If we talk about anything health related, we are not doctors. Consult your doctor. We have our opinions about doctors, but we have to go in the proper order. And I think we're going to talk some football too. If we have time.
Depending on how long this Wheel of Time rant goes.
I don't think it'll be too long, because it's only 4 episodes, and we don't want to beat a dead horse on some of the other things. Because I think the funny thing is, we both kind of had the same impression. The wokeness was the least of the problems with this show.
I'm not sure about that.
Well, there are tendrils of the wokeness that go into the bad things.
Well,
but as far as just the casting and stuff.
But I have to wonder about what you said, which was if your priority, if the first thing you're thinking of is wokeness, then you've already lost, because your focus isn't what it's supposed to be. If your first priority when hiring someone is checking a diversity box, are you going to get a good hire? Only if you accidentally stumble into it, because that's not your priority. So I do have to wonder how much of the terribleness is simply that they weren't focused on making a good story. And I guess we will.
I will say, a good story for who? Or should I use whom? I don't know. I don't know the difference. Someone can correct me on who and whom. I'm not an expert there, but I'm going to use who. Who is your audience you're going for? And that's the problem. They're going for people who have never seen the books or read the books, and they're piggybacking on the fact that people who invested the 20 years it took to get through the books, if you did them as they were being written, to say, like us, we're gonna watch it anyways, and let's try to pull in this new audience. So the best face you can put on the wokeness is they're trying to get a new audience in, whether it's females or what, because of being a fantasy novel, typically you're going to have a male audience, whether it's the different ethnic groups that go along with this, seeing the face they recognize or they're comfortable with as the role. So if you put the best face on the PC culture, you're trying to get that audience in. And there was a lot of that, because there was a lot of almost seemed like teen drama stuff, especially in that first episode, which if you go through the book progression, you would have something similar to I'll compare it to another series, Spartacus. Anybody who's watched the Spartacus series, those first 3 or 4 episodes were actually kind of dull, but they spent 3 or 4 episodes building character, getting to know the main characters, how their story, their progression. And if you can make it through those 4 episodes, the rest of the series, which gets pretty gruesome and violent and the kind of clickbait stuff, is much better because you have attachment to the characters. Here, they just threw you right in. They said, here we are, everybody's together. Okay, we're on this journey. Boom. No progression, no story, no character development at all.
Mhm.
And that's kind of a sign of the times too. Really, when you look at new shows, there's very little character development. But
Well, I didn't want to get off on this. I was thinking I was gonna try and stick to just the episodes and not get philosophical, but I think I've shared his videos with you. You know, the critical drinker.
you have not. I've heard of him, but you have not shared
Okay,
videos with me.
I thought I had. I cannot recommend the Critical Drinkers channel enough. Partly because he's Scotch, so he's got a great accent, and partly because he's Scotch, so he drinks heavily, and makes lots of references to whiskey, in his critiques of things. And he did a several part series called "Why Modern Movies Suck." There's 3 videos, and I rewatched them getting ready for this because he made a lot of good points in there. Because he's also an author. He's also a published author of Clancy-esque, spy thriller type things. And then he had another video that wasn't part of that series, but could have been, called "What Happened to Our Villains," because our villains all suck.
Mhm.
You could kind of see that in these 4 episodes as well, because you don't get. I mean, I know we're only 4 episodes in, but by the books, we're already about halfway through the book,
Mhm.
roughly, and you're getting nothing from Ishamael. He's just a
Yeah,
scary face.
Yeah, you just seen the and they wake up. There's
And
these deep conversations he had in
and
the
by
books.
this
Yeah.
point, he's already started probing them to see which one is the dragon.
Yeah, and also,
But hold on.
When you look at, well, I just want to talk about
Okay.
villains in general. When you look at villains, there's the scary R type, and then what he was supposed to be, what the books developed was he was a philosopher.
Mm-hmm.
He was the guy sitting in his chair, spouting deep thoughts,
Which is what led him
and then
to
you
the
start
dark.
wondering, and then
Yeah.
you start wondering, wow, how evil is this guy? If he's got these thoughts. Whereas they went with at least up to this point, the guy with a scary face that looks like he's going to eat your face.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But the main point I wanted to take from the Critical Drinkers series there is one of them it is they're written by children. They're and in it he talks about how they're written by and for children, and by that he means they're simple and shallow. There's no depth, which ties directly to one of his others, which is cause and effect. There's no good cause and effect. There's no setup and payoff, because that requires depth and patience. And when you look at modern movies, and especially when you compare them, like one of his comparisons was really dorky and on purpose, which was the 90s movie Tremors. You remember Tremors?
Mm-hmm.
Good quality monster B movie that doesn't look like a B movie, but it was a low budget monster movie.
Mm-hmm.
And he uses the example of the cooler, the soda cooler that goes haywire, which causes the Tremor to burst up and kill the poor old Asian man who's in all John Carpenter's movies, even though this isn't a John Carpenter movie, but it feels like it could be. Anyway, that's set up at the very beginning of the movie. Okay, so there's this short setup that tells you something about these characters, because you get this interaction between what's his face and Kevin Bacon. You get this interaction between them, which tells you something about their characters. You have this incident, and this incident pays off later in the movie, which spikes the action. So to do that, you have to have the mind of a mature adult. You can't write that if all you're focused on is the right now, is the shiny object, is that quick payoff. Okay, you can't have a setup like that. You can't have a setup and a payoff. And obviously you're not going to get the slow burn that you get in a book. I mean, you've got the novel behind you there. How many pages is that paperback? So you're obviously not going to get as slow a burn as a whole novel, but you are doing a series here. And in 4 hour long episodes, you should have the time to develop some depth.
Of actual story, 782 pages.
Okay. That's a lot of slow burn. But that's why it works. That's why the novels work. That's why they're so popular and why they engendered so much conversation about them, is because Jordan does so much setup and payoff. And sometimes the setups are way in advance, which is what caused all of the conversation and all of the early internet message boards to just blossom with people saying, I think this, and it ties back to this little section of the book and people citing their sources, which was great. Wonder of wonders.
I just there are things that were missing in that development that I just can't understand why they were missing. First of all, the empty road, the very first chapter, the setup for everything. Why didn't we get the Black Rider?
Yeah.
Why didn't we have that uncomfortable moment where all the boys came together and said, "Hey, I saw him too. I saw him too. I saw him too." That missing, yeah, it would have taken about 15 minutes worth of screenplay. That's
less than that, I think. Less than that.
But even still, that would have been semi sort of dull. But another comparison, I would say, I watched in the plane ride back from Germany, the two new It movies, and they're actually not bad. I'm going to say they were a B plus. Okay, so they're worth a watch. But comparing it to the old ones, and the way they kind of progressed Pennywise in the old ones versus just this in your face ripping people's arms off right at the beginning, Pennywise in the new one, it was exactly what we're talking about. It was that slow progression where you start to just get creeped the F out by this person or this thing, and then it culminates into that big meeting versus this thing that's already scary and ripping people apart from the beginning of the whole movie.
In which case, where do you go from here?
Yeah. And they had to go bigger and bigger and badder. And at the end, it was sort of kind of ridiculous. And which is kind of scaring me with this series because they started so hard and fast that
it's Jaws. Jaws was the first modern blockbuster on accident because the shark wouldn't work, and Spielberg was forced to use theater of the mind, and it slowly built. And then by the fourth movie, Jaws is jumping out of the water and roaring like a T-Rex. It's ridiculous.
Oh, did you ever see the Robot Chicken where they said if George Lucas had
no
directed it, and it's like the remaster, and Jaws jumps out and says, "Come back, you scumbags," and throws the harpoon back, and and then does the triple flip that Jar Jar Binks does in the movie, right, and goes back right, and then it's like, yeah, that's kind of how it is. Okay, so that's another good example. Watch the old Star Wars, the original trilogy versus the new ones, and everything in your face all at once, no development, versus this entire progression of this country bumpkin into the Jedi Knight.
Well, it's worse than that. And I commented on something the drinker said when he was talking to some people about CGI versus practical effects. And it's not that crusty old grumps like me like practical effects better. That wasn't really the problem with the prequels. Problem with the prequels is you can find interviews of George Lucas talking about I think so, like the last VHS release of the original trilogy before he did the remakes, the remasters in the late 90s. At the front of those is an interview with Leonard Martin that he does, and he talks about the effects and he makes the point that the effects are just a tool. That's all they are. They are a tool to help tell your story. Okay. But in the prequels, something you see so the Red Letter Media guys, in their ridiculously long and funny reviews of the prequels, they have a saying that they repeat, which is, you might not have noticed, but your brain did,
Mhm.
because there are things that you might not be able to vocalize consciously, but subconsciously these matter. And one of those things is the way that the the non-action scenes in the prequels are all shot the exact same way, and it bores your mind even if you don't notice it consciously. And because you can tell those are just there as filler to get you from action scene to action scene to action scene to action scene, to CGI fest to CGI fest to CGI fest. And in a lot of ways, that's what that's why I think so much of the non-action scenes in this series are boring, because they're just there to get you to the next fight scene.
Mm-hmm. Well, you start from the beginning too. They made the decision to make them adults in this in the live action version versus in the books. They're supposed to be somewhere around 16, 17
Yeah,
when they leave,
the
and
whole
not fully
point
matured.
is
And
right. The whole point is, I mean, they make a reference to that with Egwene's braid, is that she's just now being recognized as a woman by the other
Mhm.
women of the
And the
village
boys are
because she's
supposed to be a
allowed to
little
marry her.
older just because he accounted for the gap between development between boys and
Mhm,
girls.
mhm.
The boys were supposed to be like 17, 18, and
Yeah.
Egwene was supposed to be around 16 and just becoming a woman kind of thing. But they made them adults right off the bat. I mean, they were fucking, pardon my French, they were doing it in the first episode. Uh,
Mhm.
and when we look at the books, these people would see an ankle and they're like,
Exactly.
you
You've
know,
you've destroyed one of the core elements to these characters, is
yeah, they
because
were supposed to be like children going into the real world
that
versus
yeah,
these already adults just say. I mean, when in the show, when Matt and Rand get to Whitebridge, it's like it's no big deal. It's like, oh yeah, just another town. We've been to another town.
that wasn't Whitebridge. That was just some random
They
thing
just
they
made
made up.
up a
Yeah.
okay. Oh, I assumed it was Whitebridge, so I didn't. Uh, well, they
No, they
skipped over Whitebridge then because they went straight to uh, the Elsa's house, which Elsa wasn't there.
they consolidated a lot of that, um a lot of that story of Matt and Rand on the road to Camelin. They
Well, they
consolidated a lot of
consolidated
that
everything. They're not doing a
in
very good
this
job
made
of
up
passage
mining
of
town.
time.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, in the where they're at now versus where they all separated uh, was supposed to be weeks,
Mm-hmm.
and by the show it's like 2 days because
Mm-hmm.
they've
Yeah.
slept twice.
It's just
You
a few
know?
days. Um, brain fart. What was I saying? Uh, you said something that made me want to say something, and I forgot what it was. Anyway, oh, the innocence is um one of the many influences of Jordan was the fact that he was a combat marine in Nam. And so from his own explanations of kind of the germ of where this story came from, one of the uh one of the influences of how this story was told, or at least how it began, is what happens when you take some innocent kids and you throw them into the hell of the jungles of Nam.
Mhm.
Okay, so you've got, you know, 18 to 22-year-olds who have been drafted, gone through some training, and now they're in, this jungle warfare. And that was very, influential to him, obviously. And so you see that in his writing when he talks about um when he talks about combat and its effects on young people, and then and then even as you get older, that's something you lose with Tam. Is this is someone who nowadays we would say has a little bit of PTSD
Mhm.
because he fought in a very vicious war 20 years ago.
Mhm. Uh, well, and that brings me to Perrin, which is as the actors go, I didn't mind him in the first like 2, 3 episodes, but that fourth, I mean, he just he's overdoing the pouty, but I read some of Sanderson's thoughts on the series because he's kind of an advisor to some degree, even though he did state in his very politically written response to the first few episodes that they didn't listen to him on a lot of things, and he keeps trying to steer them to the books, but then he kind of reversed his path on his thoughts with but I like what they're doing kind of thing. I'm just trying to get my little 2 cents in every once in a while. And he lists a few things that they listened to him on, which an example of that was the Emansfield fight with the Trollocs. Apparently they originally wrote it where Moiraine just blows them all away. And he's like, no, we need land to come in and protect her. Mm-hmm. And that would be more realistic to how the books were written, and they listened to him on that. So that was one example. But as far as following the actual books, he's like, oh, I guess I understand why they're doing it because of limitations of film. And he had another link to an explanation on that, which I haven't gotten to read yet. But what was your last thought? So I know where I was going with this.
Oh, the innocence of the kids.
Oh, parent.
Contrasted with, yeah.
One thing he mentioned in there was he wanted in that scene where Perrin kills his wife for it actually to be Master Luhan, and Master Luhan gets killed in that rage. And he was like, it's because they're trying to set up the berserker kind of wild trance that Perrin goes into when he fights. But I'm like, this is not a Dungeons and Dragons game where you pick a character right at the beginning. Perrin developed that kind of berserker rage and trance as time went on because he was thrown in one bad situation after another bad situation where he had to react.
And it goes right back to what you were saying about it is there's no setup here. So where do you go from here?
In fact, until I saw that explanation, I didn't even get that's what they were going for. It just looked like he made a mistake.
I got it. Yeah, I got it. And it was stupid. Yeah, I got it. And I was annoyed because Perrin was always my favorite character. Well, for most of the series. His point is that he is the gentle giant. That's his archetype. And so he is
capable of doing damage, but does everything he can to not.
He is quiet and methodical. He's long in thought and slow to action. Okay. He's not, that's why he's quiet. It's not because he's pouty and sad. He's quiet because he wants to think things through. And that's his contrast with Matt is the affable jokester. He's the one who's going to, act now and worry about it later. Okay. That's their contrast. And that's why they work as friends and as characters together.
Which is why the dynamic work, because then as the story develops, because of the situations they're thrown in, Perrin becomes more impulsive in situations where Matt becomes more responsible.
Yeah.
As time goes on.
You've already set him up as this hidden dark side, this hidden berserker in him. No, that comes from
the PTSD.
Well, more specifically, I would say it comes from the wolves. It comes from that connection to the wolves, and that is a key part to the development of that part of his character. He's so nervous about contact with the wolves because he thinks that is what is making him go berserk, and he's constantly having to push that back so he doesn't turn into an animal.
For those that noticed the hiccup in the video, I heard clinking behind me. Luckily, it was a plastic cup the dog had pulled off the counter, not a glass.
Oh dear.
All right. So Perrin, Berserk.
Well, the main point is they're not giving any of these characters any amount of depth, even to small things. I think you mentioned this last time. I know you mentioned it, to me when we were talking about it, is simple things. Why does Perrin already have a beard?
Yeah,
It,
simple
it,
things.
it
And
seems
why does
simple
Matt
and
have a beard?
it seems simple and dumb, but no, this was an element of Perrin's character. This is an
In
element
fact,
of his
it was an
growth.
element of what everybody loves, the love story that
Mhm.
happens later, because he started having the beard to make a certain person happy, because he wanted to shave it, and she mentioned that it looked good on him. And you got this shy little
Exactly.
guy trying to impress the girl. Hey, country bumpkin trying to grow up.
Yeah.
uh
Yeah. But already again, where do you go from here?
you just well okay, so let's look at character development from a skill standpoint. We can reference Lord of the Rings here. You look at okay, say this is a movie that did a good job of country bumpkins going out into the real world and then being guided by the people they were
Mhm.
with, where Boromir was teaching the hobbits how to use the weapons that they had. Why didn't we get a scene or two of that in this supposedly weeks of travel with Lan and Moiraine, with the guys, and which actually he says in the books that
Mhm.
Lan was helping them. Okay, if you're going to do this, let's teach you
Mhm.
how to not chop off your foot. I think is the phrase. And so he's teaching Rand how to use a sword. He's teaching uh, uh, Perrin how to use his axe. It doesn't really specify with Matt, but then go on to the Tom progression, which it looks like we're already past the spot where they leave him.
Yeah.
We had weeks of him teaching them how to juggle and play the flute and do all these things from a Gleeman standpoint, which my big beef with Tom is, okay, you're going to get an actor who's supposedly this really talented person and they can't learn how to play something like a harp or that would have fit into the story. So they say,
Because you're trying to attract the kids.
yeah, so let's give him a guitar.
Yes.
Let's give him a guitar,
Let's give him a guitar and a raspy voice. Like
Mm-hmm.
what are you doing? And let's hide his colorful patches inside his coat so you never see it. So instead it looks like he's got this, cool trench coat thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But again, the development. So where do we go from here? All of a sudden, there's going to be a moment in these shows, which hasn't happened yet, where these kids coming out of the country are going to have to be badass in a battle. And
And how did they get there?
how did they get there? What happened? Where was the
Don't
progression
know.
for that? Yeah. All of a sudden, Rand has earned his Heron Mark blade without any instruction.
Which they haven't even they have
They showed the Heron.
they showed the heron,
Yeah.
but that's actually something that matters, and they could have in the scenes where this in the books is where it happens, is where he's teaching them how to use the blade. Lan explains to Rand what that heron means, and again,
I have a
set
feeling
up
that's
and
going to come up
payoff.
in that meeting in Andor.
Assuming that happens, yeah,
Yeah.
that's going to
It's
come
kind of
up
happened
there.
because it introduces someone
So many
who's,
characters.
yes, well, at least integral, Elaine, to the whole
Well,
thing.
they're all pretty integral. She becomes a main character, but then even the smaller characters there are
Mm-hmm.
all big time small characters that continue throughout the book. Um, speaking of which, what's his name? I just had a brain fart. Who's the guy who teaches Perrin about the wolves?
Elias.
Elias. Are they going to cut him out?
They can't with the wolf story.
You'd think they can't, but they already have, in that they've met the
Well, but
Tinkers
Tom came on
before.
later. They
Yeah,
wrote Tom to come on later, so maybe they have him after the Tinkers, because
the part with the Tinkers was where I said, I don't know if that was what you were thinking, but when I said episode 4 was almost good and it made me mad, it was because of the part with the Tinkers.
well, how
That
did that
was
make you mad?
actually
Because
good.
I actually didn't mind the Tinker
Oh, because
role.
because then the rest of the episode was
Okay.
the garbage it continued to be, and it was like here in this
Well,
in this
I
small little
liked how they
part.
started Logain, even though,
Yes.
yeah, I liked how they showed the taint. I did like that because I was
Uh,
concerned how that was going to come out on. So well, let's give our good due here.
yeah.
The way they showed the taint was really cool. The way they had to interact with the character, even though no one else could see it, they did a good job of kind
Yeah.
of showing that, which, so that was good. The actor that played Logan, meh, but the way they wrote his character was good.
Yeah,
Up until
I liked him in that very first scene, that opening
Mhm.
scene. But then the more you see him, the more I go,
Yeah. And then where it all just kind of was the end, where we've got, so for those that have watched it, please keep listening. If you haven't, this is kind of integral to the story of the show versus the story of the books, is they mention a fifth person that could be the dragon. And then they pan to a shot of Logan, but that's just to throw you off, because at the end of the episode, Nynaeve does her thing, and they have made allusions to the bright light and and he makes the comment that it's shone so bright at the end before they apparently gentle him on the spot. So they introduce you to the fact that she could be that, she's that fifth person that could be the dragon. And I've got my thoughts on how this might end up playing out from a just the direction it's going standpoint. It's not even, I can't even use the word woke. It's just the way shows are now.
Well, see, I think it is the wokeness, because I thought that from the beginning, where it was implied that Egwene could be the dragon as well, is that this is just the LGBTQ LMNOP nonsense of this is that.
Oh,
Is
speaking
the,
of that, did you notice Atlanta's warders were gay?
yeah, but I didn't mind that so much because, I mean, it's heavily implied that the Greens are kind of Roman in their extracurricular activities,
Yeah.
or at least a lot of them are. Not
I
all
just
of
thought
them,
it was
but
a
at least
little overt, not necessarily like an implication, like you can just, it was just, we're gonna, okay, so it's the difference, the violence versus the shark versus the showing the shark. It was we can make this implication, it's there and people accept, can kind of go along with it, versus we're gonna throw this in your face and make it as obvious as we possibly can. And that's the difference, I think. Throw in your face wasn't the right term, but making it obvious as we can. Kind of saying, this is what's happening versus you just noticing it.
yes,
Maybe they don't trust the audience to notice it. Maybe, I don't know.
yeah. Which in the books they just call them pillow friends.
Yeah, exactly.
When they're talking about the lesbian affairs of the Aes Sedai, and because again, this is an old-fashioned medieval lowercase c conservative culture. This isn't today, and that matters. That's part of the storytelling.
Especially when it comes to the Matt timeline, because of how much hell he took just for being slightly looser around the ends than everybody else. And even he would be considered, from a sexual standpoint, conservative in this day and age. But I'm going to get it on record here. I have a theory on where they're going with this, and
okay,
I hope I'm wrong.
Mine is simply that, the male soul versus the female soul, that there isn't. It's, it's part and parcel to the idea that you can be a man in a woman's body or vice versa. And it's a complete and total rejection of the establishment of the world by Jordan, which is, there is a male half, there is a female half. Men and women are different. In fact, this comes up later with one of the Forsaken, who is a man who gets killed, and then the Dark One shoves his soul into a woman's body. Well, one of the some weirdness.
One of the commenters on our post said that exact thing. He said, how can you have a taint of the male half of the source if there isn't a male and female half? So you can't be reborn.
The dragon,
that was integral.
Yeah.
The dragon was reborn and to be tainted.
Yes, which is why he would go mad and break the world. How could the dragon go mad and break the world if the dragon is born as a woman wielding the female half of the source, the untainted half of the source. It makes absolutely no sense.
Well, and even in the books, uh, the Dark One brings back one of his minions from the dead,
Yeah.
and as a joke puts him in a female
Yeah, that's
body.
what I was just referencing.
But at the same time, he's still, because the soul came back, still had the male half of the
Yeah, it was still
source.
channeling the male half of the source, which caused all kinds of
Because
problems
his soul was male.
for the good guys. But this is part of the setting and payoff that's driving me crazy, that everything is simple and direct. Why do we already know about the dragon?
Mm-hmm.
And why is it glossed over? Part of the point, again, part of Jordan's point, the depth, is he's taking the trope of a chosen one and turning it on its head, because no one wants the chosen one, because the chosen one will save us but also destroy us. The prophecies of the dragon are filled with all of these paradoxes. And so, you know, most of the world, it lives in fear of the Dragon Reborn and reviles the very concept. Even those who are learned and know the prophecies and know that as bad as it's going to be, we need him. Even among those, there are still those that want to constrain him, if not kill him.
Which they kind of addressed with the conversations between Alana, Moiraine, and Leandrin, in that because Alana speculating out loud.
Yep.
What happens if we accidentally take care of the person who's supposed to save us all?
Yep.
You know, which was not her place in the books, but I can see how that wasn't a horrible decision in the show.
Yeah, but it's fine if you're going to have Alana, be there and throughout it. It's like when they gave lines that were said in the books by I just brain farted, the elf guy, Elrond. In the movie, they gave lines that were said by his sons to his daughter because they wanted that part to be bigger. So that's fine. So it would still allow those lines to be said and that lore to be established. That wasn't the problem. The problem is, okay, so what she just said, then how come all of these country bumpkins who would know very little about the Dragon Reborn, why aren't they freaking the hell out when you say one of them is the Dragon Reborn? Why aren't they freaking out and running away?
Okay, so to add a layer to that, not only would they not know a lot about it, all they would have is, and that's addressed in the books, is the horror stories about it, because they were given children's stories that would make it seem like this was one of the most evil, the Antichrist, basically,
the boogeyman, the Antichrist, the story you tell naughty children to get them to behave is, that's one of the things that are mentioned, is these kinds of stories were used like Grimm's fairy tales of behave, or the witch is going to put you in a pie and eat you.
And why didn't one of them shit their pants when the Fade showed up for the first time, or even a Trolloc was seen for the first time? Going way back to episode 1, and we're talking about character development, but also being cool. How cool would it have been to show the scene where Rand takes his father out and sneaks past all the Trollocs and then guts through the travel back to Eamon's Field? That would have been a cool ass scene had they put it in, and it would have contributed to the character development, because he was a freaking scared little kid trying to get his father to safety.
Yeah, and they put in all this stuff with the White Cloaks. They put in all this stuff with the Aes Sedai traveling with Logain. So they've added stuff that, is it really necessary, or is it necessary right here when you could have spent
or
that
even not even just
time.
the timing, not even just the timing. The White Cloaks right there would have been right if it was in the Perrin and Egwene story. But they did it in just another place. Now I didn't mind their depiction of the White Cloaks. I'm assuming that's the Elder Bornhold, because he never says his name.
Mea culpa, the guy I thought was Ernie Hudson from the trailer obviously isn't, and it made me sad. And I didn't mind the depiction of the White Cloaks. In fact, that was done well, because they give you right off the bat they show, they don't tell just how creepy and scary the questioners are.
Mhm.
So right off the bat that when we run into white cloaks, we need to be afraid.
Yeah, so I don't mind that, although the actual overt killing of the one sister,
Yeah.
that was going too far to me,
Yeah.
because no matter how bad people thought they were, they didn't overtly do that.
Right. And that weakens your characters who are supposed to be bad mamma jammas.
Mhm.
Even the white cloaks, even as bad as they are, they make a point to say that, yeah, if they caught a sister alone and they could get the drop on her, sure, they'd kill her, but they're very leery of, and to walk around with the rings advertising that you've killed them.
Mhm.
Even a white cloak treads carefully around an Aes Sedai. They make a point that even the Lord Commander of the White Cloaks, if he was summoned to the Emerald seat, he would go, because
Mhm.
that's how much power they have. As whoever says it in the books, yeah, he'd be scheming the whole way of how he's going to assassinate her, but he'd still go because
Well,
you
and
have
even
to.
with Eamon Valda, I pictured him more as oh, what's the cat's name from Scarlet Letter?
It's been way
The
too long
yeah,
since I read that book.
the preacher from Scarlet Letter. That's how I pictured him more. But I don't mind how they depicted him. It's just I think the killing of the sister was going too far, and the carrying around of the rings and stuff. But did need to quickly let you know that he was that dude.
Yeah. So it does create problems later on.
Mhm.
Well, now you have to either ignore that or try and figure out a way to work around. You've just made problems for yourself.
Which I'm wondering where they're going with the White
But
Cloaks here, because in the books they meet up with Perrin and Egwene, and Bornhold is the reasonable guy, and Child Buyer is the zealous one,
mhm.
and it's kind of an interplay of the reasonable one out just because he happened to be the commander. Uh,
Well, I assumed that was done to send the White Cloaks to Rivers so that they would be there in
which is accelerating the story.
which is accelerating the story.
Yeah.
Again, my biggest problem with it was the screen time. Did that really have to be done right now when you could have spent that time? Why didn't we spend the entire first episode getting to know these characters more before leaving the Two Rivers?
Yeah, something simple, showing Rand on the farm a little bit with his dad, showing Perrin in the forge with Master Luhan, as a not as a kid, but as an apprentice. So he's still the same actor, but he's being shown what to do and progressed, and oh, you're getting good at this kind of thing. Showing Matt whatever the badger scene. Remember, they talk about putting the flower on the badger and going through something. Those little things could have been the whole first episode.
Yeah.
And then
So
Naive, they're trying to make her badass right off the bat.
Well, she was to a degree, but not.
But they're playing a different
degree.
story with it. Yeah. She wasn't an orphan. She wasn't this.
That's odd.
Yeah. There's so many things they're adding that I'm like, first of all, unnecessary, and second of all, it actually takes away from
her personal vendetta against the Aes Sedai. I think it takes away from the fact that her biggest beef with them, her biggest beef with Moraine, is that she took these kids, again, not young adults, kids, almost adults, but still teenagers, out of the Two Rivers, and she, has the wisdom, feels compelled to protect them. That the Two Rivers is hers to protect. That's her beef. That takes away that personal connection.
Well, and I think they also, with her channeling, they messed up because she channeled in desperation in the show, where she needed to be angry. And that was actually a theme for her whole storyline for 12 books.
Yeah.
That she needed to be angry to be able to channel, versus she got this desperate moment where this guy she all of a sudden loves, within 2 days of meeting him.
Well, I don't think they took it too far there. I don't think all of a sudden she loves him, but there's definitely, that was one of the few things I thought was good outside of that Tinker scene, is setting up the connection and the sexual tension between her and Lan.
Well,
I, I,
yeah, that
I
was good up until that scene. That's what I thought.
up until that scene, because part of Nynaeve's character is that she's offended by and angered by death and disease and injury for anyone.
Mhm.
You know, it could be a white cloak, or it could have been an Aes Sedai who she hates. She doesn't care. She wants to stop that. She wants to end pain and suffering and death and disease. So yeah, there's an extra element that she wants to heal Lan because she's got that connection. But again, she doesn't need that connection to heal someone.
Mm. Well,
That's an
but my
integral
point was
part of
it
her
was the
character.
anger versus
Yes,
the desperation.
versus the desperation of, you know, I like this guy and he's dying right in front of me. No, she gets mad when she sees someone dying and she can't heal them.
Well, another part of that scene that I didn't like was Kirane Nagashi, the sister that died.
Mm-hmm.
Her warder. They kind of showed that he felt her dying.
Yeah, but
but
they
then he
didn't
was
show him
still
going berserk.
But then he was still surprised when he found her dead. And I'm
I-
like, I thought that he was going to go berserk and save everybody in that scene because he just went out there and just put his life on the line.
I was expecting him to charge into the midst. I thought, okay,
Mhm.
here I was absolutely anticipating him charging up the hill into a horde of dragon
Mhm.
sworn and going berserk and then dying so that we could see what happens. I did not expect him to be stupid and
Go to the cave.
focused
Yeah.
and go to the cave and then end with him cradling his Aes Sedai in his arms. That's not that's not how that works. That's not how any of this works.
Yeah. I mean, I don't mind that Alana did her thing there, but that in combination, him going berserk and the battle, Aes Sedai doing her thing would have been kind of a cool look. You could have had a cool moment there. You could have that cool moment you want and still stuck to kind of the nature of the books.
And again, you know, massive spoiler alerts for anyone. Skip ahead a minute or two if, because I know in the comments some people haven't read the books. 3, 2, 1, you've been warned. When Moiraine dies, Lan goes berserk.
Mhm.
It is a struggle to keep Lan alive.
Mhm.
Which
I have a feeling they're going to show that with this warder.
That's a good point because they're going to stick with this little caravan for a while. So you know what, that they may be setting up, rather than setting up the berserk, which is what I was expecting and kind of wanting, they're going to set up the moroseness.
Mm-hmm.
And so in the next episode, it's going to be a struggle just to even get him to eat.
Yeah, and they're going to have that parallel with Logain, who just got gentled, I think. That would be the best, I think the best thing they could do with it. But we'll see what they do. I think the best thing they could have done is stuck closer to the books, but.
Yeah, I will say something else that was surprising right off the bat that gave me hope. That very opening scene with Logain when who's the red sister?
Leandrin.
See, I kept getting confused when I found out that was Leandrin and going, because I assumed they were making that Elida to set her up earlier.
No, they named her in the first episode. That first scene, the very first episode.
I completely missed the name there.
Because remember, Elida still should be in Camelin.
Should be, yeah, but I assumed they were going to put her here.
Now, I actually like the casting they did with Leandrin. She gives you that exact same feel you should have. Now, they could have done the braids. These things, these little things, like you said, with Perrin's beard, every actor and actress can do it. You could braid her damn hair.
Mm-hmm.
You could freaking shave his face and he can grow a beard again. Matt, you could shave his face. In fact, the actor is clean shaven in all his regular stuff. And then he shows up with a beard as Matt. So.
Because they want them to be young adults. They don't want them to be, you know, almost adults. Anyway, so
but that's the little things, you know, when you're talking about sticking to a book, these things that every actor and actress can do are the things that why didn't you do it?
Yeah. But because everything is simple and direct. And so where I was surprised right at the beginning, I thought, oh, well, maybe there's hope for this because we were talking about the wokeness is Leandrin is a straight up chauvinist.
Mhm.
And they actually showed that. She hates men. Um, and she says right at the beginning, the power was meant for women. You men taint and ruin everything. I was like, wow, yeah, that's what a lot of people, especially the Reds, all the Reds, but a lot of people think is, men are bad because of the taint, and
The
it
taint is
kind of
toxic masculinity.
the taint is toxic masculinity. Well, what it is in the books is in a lot of ways it's so there was a corruption of the scripture by not a lot, but some medieval scholars and thinking, actually more in the common people, but I digress, of original sin, that women are tainted because it was Eve who took of the fruit and then gave it to Adam. So it's kind of an inversion of that. It's kind of Jordan's spin on original sin,
Mhm.
uh, and showing how people react to these things based off of preconceived notions and fears, and then what the cause and effect is there. So I thought, oh wow, they're actually going to do some of this, and then they go into the nonsense of, a woman could be the Dragon Reborn. Wait, what? Huh? How does
Well,
that
okay, so
work?
this is the one I wanted to get on film before it actually happens, if it does happen, is there's two kind of directions they're going with this. Either they're just
Mm.
blowing smoke at everybody to make the whole community happy with it, could be any of these people, and
Which is what
there's
I
no such
assumed
thing
it
as a
was.
male and
Yeah.
female, or they're all going to be the dragon
Mm.
at the end of the day. They're all going to be a manifestation of the dragon and be like, oh, we are this because diversity or something. Uh, inclusion. The dragon is multiple people. So
I am
that,
Spartacus. Yeah.
yeah, that's my other direction they could go. That I
I just assumed they were trying um to have some red herrings to make a little bit of intrigue for anyone who hasn't read the
that's the
books.
best results. Yeah.
Which is still silly because even in their own setups, they've made it clear that it doesn't make sense that one of the girls can be the Dragon Reborn.
Mhm.
Just like they may make it clear, not this isn't just grumpy old nerd who's saying, why isn't it like in the books? Even from your own explanations in the show of who and what the Dragon Reborn is, it doesn't make sense that you would just straight up say, one of you is the Dragon Reborn, now come with me.
Mhm.
No, you don't say that. It's it's why they beat around the bush so much in the books, and it's why it's not until the third book is actually titled The Dragon Reborn. It, because you have to beat around the bush here until you are absolutely certain it is incontrovertible and you can get enough people to rally behind him so that he just doesn't get shivved by someone.
Which is, you were talking about titles. That fourth episode is called Dragon Reborn.
Yeah.
And then they show Logain all the way through, and then all of a sudden Nynaeve takes that mantle at the end, and like, why
Yeah.
did you call that episode Dragon Reborn?
Uh-huh.
But when realistically, of the girls that came out of Eamon's Field, Egwene was the badass of them all at
Yeah.
the end of the day.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well, Nynaeve, I think, has more raw power. She is, I
but I mean,
believe.
from a influence on the end of the day
Yes.
type thing.
Yes. Because she is also headstrong, but she's not as emotional as Nynaeve is,
Mhm.
which is something I think they're doing a decent job of showing. I think that's probably more the actress though than the writing and
Yeah.
directing, based on everything else, is how emotional and headstrong to a fault. I mean, it 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 is positive to a degree, but Nynaeve has some serious faults that make a lot of fans not like her and be annoyed by her scenes because of this headstrong to the point of arrogance.
Mhm.
So she gets very, very annoying in that way.
Yeah. I wasn't impressed with her in the first episode, but you're actually kind of right. You're actually not supposed. You're supposed to kind of think she is that way, annoying and kind of. So I kind of had to take a second look at it. I was like, oh yeah, she's actually supposed to be written kind of like that. So Uh, it's a lot of the other characters. Perrin's just way too broody. He's not supposed to be at this point.
Yeah.
He gets that way as time
But
goes on.
th- th- this is another element of wokeness that annoys me. Why does Captain Marvel suck? Why did the Black Widow suck? Why did the Star Wars sequels suck? Because if your first priority is wokeness, then you cannot have a woman weaker than a man at any point.
Mhm. Well, and we can go back to Nynaeve,
But
because her power, her raw power, was immense, but she
yes,
had her limitations, and they're
yes,
not doing a good job of saying what her limitation was at this
she
point.
she was making her boyfriend was annoying because she had this bond with her father that they talk about in the books. She had this bond with her father who taught her how to track and
Yeah.
hunt. Okay, that's
But she's an orphan, so where'd she learn it from?
exactly.
Mhm.
So I assumed that's how she was going to get. I thought it was dumb that the Trolloc dragged her away, but I assumed that it was to show her sneaking away. No, because she doesn't sneak away. She goes all Navy SEAL ninja and stabs the thing in the back and kills it. Like, what the heck? Again, because you cannot have a woman weaker than a man in any aspect. So we have to show her being
It's
as
not just a
badass
female
as
thing in this series though, because they already had Rand killing, and they already had Perrin doing his thing, fighting off
going
Trollocs, and
berserk.
you
Well,
know,
with Rand, at least in that first one, it
he did kill a
worked
Trolloc.
because it
Yeah,
worked like it did in the book, which was basically on accident.
but then sneaking away should have been the next part. But
because
did they
he's
even
not.
show how he got out of there?
He just walks into the village, riding Bella, who they like mention once, but is which is fine. But Bella the Wonder Horse gets short shrift in the series.
Okay, no,
he
no,
just
no, no,
shows up
no,
into the
no.
village.
Okay, so this is short shrift. So we need to pivot a little bit. Things that were ridiculous that shouldn't have happened or should have happened. Bella should be in the books or in the movies, in the show. Bella should be an integral part because she was. The freaking pony was one of the main characters in this whole series, and people are missing this awesome thing that because it not only extends to the kids, it extends to Swan later.
It's an
Yeah,
homage to Bill the Pony from Lord of the Rings, and Jordan turns it up to 11.
yeah,
And it's great. It's great.
And so you've got that, but my biggest beef in the first 4 episodes is the freaking libel and slander of Abel Cawthon.
I forgot to put you on this because I knew you texted it to me.
I was about to punch a wall. This guy who is supposed to be like an integral part of bringing people together later in the books. Him and Tam.
Yep.
Him and Tam are the glue to the 2 rivers when it all comes down to it. Perrin spoiler alert again, 3, 2, 1, blah. Perrin comes back and saves the day, but he never saves the day without Tam and Abel as his guides.
Mm-hmm.
And Abel being thrown under the bus as this lecherous piece of trash father,
turning his wife into an alcoholic, and making Matt as moody and emo as Perrin for
Matt's
no freaking
progression
reason.
is becoming more like Abel in the books.
Yes.
And where do you go from here? Because now he can't become more like Abel, or else he becomes a shitty dude. Yeah, as progressive as I am socially, they made Abel a shitty ass dude, and he was one of my favorite people in the books, and that pissed me off.
A small character with a big impact, especially later on. And while we're on it, where was Perrin's family? Because that's going to be important later too. You gave him a wife just to kill her. You don't even
again the influence of Master Ruhan. One of the biggest moments in book 4, is it book 4 he goes back?
Yeah.
Book 4, one of the biggest moments is when Master Luhan starts listening to him
Mhm.
instead of the other
Mhm.
way around. So had you set that up in the beginning with an episode that shows him in the forge with Luhan ordering him around and all this stuff, and then come back in season 4, if you're going by the books, and all of a sudden this guy's deferring to him, and he's like, why is he deferring to me? And then his new love interest is like, because you're the leader, which is how it kind of worked out. That would have been a powerful storyline that you could bring back later. Whereas now he killed his wife, there's no other person in the forge. He's going to go back and just kill some white cloaks, I guess, and
Who
be done
knows?
with the day.
Whatever.
Yeah.
Um, I was about to rant about how Bran Alver is skinny, and it made me mad.
There
Ne-
was that.
Never trust a
These,
skinny
again,
innkeeper.
again, the little things that made the books good are
Yeah,
like,
never trust a
why?
skinny innkeeper. Never trust a skinny innkeeper is something that comes up. But actually, what that made me think of that's more important is they have this stupid, what is the point of shoving you're a woman now shove you into the water and almost die? What was even the point of that when they could have taken that time to set up the interesting gender roles? And one of the funny and fun things about the way Jordan describes this is that the women think they're in charge and the men think they're in charge, and they both think that the other one doesn't know that they know that I know that you know that they know. Is the women all say, yeah, of course we're really in charge, and we just let the men think they're in charge. And the men say, well, of course we're in charge, and we just let the women think that they're in charge. Because this is how people think. And it's one of those things that's vocalizing and shining a light on how we act and think subconsciously so often. And it's what makes the interactions between men and women in the series so interesting. And they don't set that up at all. There's no village council. They mention the women's circle and they show it, but they show it doing something stupid. Which I have so many rants. It's like every scene, something made me mad. Like, why does the two rivers look like it looks? This is not an agrarian society. It's sitting in the middle of mountains. And that actually, again, this is something that could have a big impact later. Is how are you going to show the battles later? How are you going to show the two rivers later and all the stuff that happens there when you've stuck it in this tight little gully already? And it's like, why would you even do that? And you show in all these other scenes that you have filming locations where you could have shown. And this is part of the setup. This isn't just grumpy old man nerd ranting. Part of the setup is that this is a pastoral setting. Not only are these youths, but they're youths coming from a rather idyllic setting, especially compared to the rest of the world. You know, these aren't hardy mountain folk per se. These are hardy farmers. And this comes up later, is that, you know, the wolves steal our sheep, the weather kills our crops, but oh well, we breed more sheep and we plant more crops because damn it, we're farmers and that's what we do. And it keeps going like so even even the setting, even the visuals didn't make sense. But I'll go, the very first scene annoyed me. And again, this is one of those things that seems small, but it matters. And it's part of the wokeness of women have to be just like men instead of being women. It showed the very first scene is Moraine getting dressed for some silly reason, I guess, because they wanted to show her naked backside and tease you with that. But she's getting dressed like a man. She's putting on this you know, cool leather trench coat thing and these adventurer clothes, and no, Moraine is a lady. Literally, she comes from nobility. She dresses like a lady. She
In
acts
fact,
like a lady.
from the country bumpkin standpoint, which you get is your first vision, they talk about, oh my gosh, there's a lady in town.
They have no idea that she's an Aes Sedai. They don't know what that
which means she was so ladylike that she set herself apart from the other women of the town.
And one of the many things that makes the character interesting is that even though she has this incredibly cunning and calculating mind, she will disarm people by acting like a simple lady, and she will disarm them with this trick of nobility. Is I'm just a lady traveling. This is my man at arms, my protector. So this is, I mean, you see that with the white cloaks of, protecting yourself that way. It, this is part of the depth. None of these characters have depth. This is part of Moraine's depth, is that she's this polite lady who this is how she gets you to do what she wants because she's a lady and you're just a peasant. And then when she needs to, then she becomes the bad mama jamma, giving orders directly and with such a force of personality that even though she's 5 foot nothing, and she is, I mean, it makes a point of pointing in the books of pointing out that she's shorter than everybody,
Mhm.
significantly so.
Yeah,
She's a
she's
very
like gymnast
petite,
short.
she
Yeah.
is a very petite, diminutive woman, and yet she has such a force of personality
That you
that
feel like she's taller than you.
when she
Yeah.
drops the lady act and says, "You're going to do this," you find yourself doing it.
It's a good time for a bathroom break, and then we need to go into the comments and then talk about the wokeness aspect.
All right.
All right. I should have said the negative comments, because if people kind of notice from this whole conversation, which is actually going a lot longer than I thought it would, we've used the word woke a lot, but a lot of our reviews to this point have nothing to do with the politics of the show. When we did our pre-show show, we talked about the casting and the feminist trends and everything, and we did touch on a little bit of the feminists in the previous hour, but we didn't get onto the casting or the skin tone stuff or anything like that. And there's
because so far my comments on the wokeness is all because that's my supposition on why the show is so crap, is because their worldview is so twisted, because they are so encased in this thick bubble of wokeness that it is keeping them from focusing on telling a good story.
Well, and this is part of activism, because go back to my strategy of piss people off, use their reaction as the proof of why you pissed them off. There's so much wrong with this show that is outside the realm of who they cast for what and how they put it in there, that it creates a lot of kind of animosity towards the creation of it. But there's that fallback of, we did all this other stuff. So if you're complaining about the show, that means you're in essence are complaining about it. And if you're complaining about it, you are racist, you are sexist, you are you're transphobic, you're xenophobic, or whatever. So they put all these things in there that if you complain about the show in general, they can say, well, you're this. But those things are also in there. So we get into kind of part two of this, is why and how and what the books say versus what is actually portrayed on film. So honesty is key. Had they come out and said, okay, so there is this thing that we talked about in the last episode where people have these kind of homogeneous areas where you can kind of tell where they're from, and there's very little diversity within regions, even though the continent is very diverse. But at the same time, if they had come out and said, well, we're going to kind of just do away with that because there's just too much involved with that, we want a little bit quicker progression, so it's going to be a homogeneous world from the beginning. Okay, cool. You say that directly right up front, that's fine. But they didn't. What they did is, we're just going to do this thing, and when people complain about it, we're going to say you're racist, or you're sexist, or you're whatever.
We're going to cast this way, not because of X, Y, and Z reasons that we have laid out that would make a lot of sense, but for the sake of casting this way. They said that explicitly.
Well, and not only that is they have teams of people who have these books on speed dial to bring up passages in the book that can support their side. And so we get to one of the comments. Probably shouldn't show it just because I don't know if it's his real name on that, but he does have a name on this. But it talks about Sen, Cenn, and I keep always get his name wrong. Buie.
Yeah, the pronunciations are a little weird.
Yeah, the pronunciation on that one's a little weird. But it says he was described within the first chapter being gnarled and dark as an old root. So he's a Two Rivers man. And he is described in the first chapter as gnarled and dark as an old root, right here on page 12 if you have the paperback. Now, what he continues to say from this comment is basically this destroys your entire argument that all the Two Rivers people are white.
I hate that verb. You know, the use of words like it
verbiage.
destroys.
As we talked about in previous episodes, it destroys this, but it doesn't. If you really think about it, I responded. I kind of had a long response to this guy because it started off with pretty sure nothing got destroyed. The Aiel are also constantly described as dark or sundark, unless the clothed portions of them are exposed. So Sen was also a roofer. It's a pretty good job for getting a nice leathery tan as you get old, right?
And getting tar stuck to your skin.
And both of us have done roofing in the hot summer.
August in Oklahoma, not fun.
And I may not look at it at the moment because it's not summer here, but I can get darker than most Hispanic people if I spend all summer in the sun. But you would still never confuse me for being from Mexico or from Latin America.
I have an uncle who in the summertime gets darker than a lot of the full-blooded Indians around there. Okay, so he gets mistaken for a Cherokee frequently in the summertime. You've seen him. But that's just the summertime tan. The family line comes from England and is quite pale.
So I went on further because I've seen other arguments for this. And one of the passages that a lot of people bring up is in chapter 40. Elida is grilling Rand when he's brought before the court. So hopefully this happens in the shows. So because it's, I think, pretty damn important. And she's grilling him about being from the Two Rivers period because he's got red hair and gray eyes and the hair and mark blade and everything. And the passage they always bring up is she talks about how light his skin is compared to the Two Rivers. And what they fail to mention is the fact that she had to pull his sleeve up to do that. And it even says that, where is it at? Okay, so Two Rivers people are dark of hair and of eye, and they seldom have such height. Her hand darted out to push back his coat sleeve, exposing lighter skin the sun had not reached, or such skin. So it wasn't his skin that you could see from his face and his hands and etc. She had to pull his sleeve up to show the part that the sun never got to. So again, the Aiel are sun dark, but then every time they expose their skin in any of the scenes, they're pale as can be.
Because they're all light-eyed and fair-haired. They're all blonde and red-headed. In fact, someone with blonde or red hair in the main part of the continent, the main part of the story world, is very rare. It's why the Aiel stand out, and it's why someone like Rand stands out, or later Elaine with her very blonde hair stands out. These things stand out. And if you're not going to do that, there are other ways to do it. And they actually try and do this with Tom when he meets Matt, and he knows that where he's from or not from because of his accent. Except practically everyone in the show is using the same generic British accent. If you were going to do that, then do that. Then say, hey, we're going to make the Two Rivers distinct. we're going to cast people, we're going to cast actors or actors who can do a Welsh accent,
Mhm.
because what the Welsh accent is very distinct and it kind of sounds country bumpkiny. So like Wales or even a little bit of Northern England, it kind of has a country bumpkiny accent. That's a good way to portray that. And it would stand out from that softer, more generic British accent.
I mean,
And
what are they going to do when they get to Bell Damon? Doman, doobie doobie doo,
dooby dooby dooby
doobie
dooby
doobie doo. You
dooby
know,
dooby.
uh,
And then you would have your diversity, because you could say, hey, we're not going to do the uh the visuals, the look of the people from this area, because it would just limit us. We don't, we don't care what kind of a person, you know ethnically we find to portray this character, so long as they can do this accent.
mhm.
That would make sense, and it would still enhance the story and set up the world. Now none of these things make sense when you either have to ignore them, or you throw them in, like Tom pointing out Matt's accent, and the audience going, what accent? He sounds like everybody else.
Mhm.
You're the
Uh,
only one that sounds different because you're all raspy.
so then I go on to say, if he was described in the way of say like Tuan or the Sea Folk,
Yeah,
then it would have destroyed my argument. It really would have, because they were specifically described a certain way.
you know
And
or some
other
of the
than,
Southerners who are described as having like olive skin.
yeah, I mean, so we can banter of what degrees of pale and what degrees of sun dark or sun tans we can do. But
Mm-hmm.
as far as just saying that's proof that you're wrong, that they were even close to this and there wasn't diversity, no, it didn't destroy any argument. We
Yeah,
can sit. We
and
can.
it's, again, you've cherry picked one thing
Mhm.
and ignored everything else. All
Mhm.
the other people, it makes a point of how pale they are.
Well, and especially, I mean, we're talking about Sundark. Even with the ladies, a lot of times when it uses the word pale, it was when they're in their naked scenes.
Yeah,
Uh,
it's when they're in the bath, or with the when they're in the sweat tent, and he he he's using it to set the world scene as well as set that scene, to let you know what's going on and paint that picture in your mind. And one of the other commenters made a good point that this doesn't make sense. I mean, yeah, okay, if you're I did have the thought that one of the ways you could justify this casting is with the breaking. That this would be a shorthand way to show the audience who doesn't know about the breaking of the world. That
mhm.
that all of these peoples who maybe in our minds should be live in separate places, and maybe they did, but the breaking of the world made everything topsy-turvy, and now everything's all mixed up.
Mhm.
Except one, you haven't mentioned the breaking at all. I think
Mhm.
they've had one or two mentions to the dragon breaking the world, but they have yet to explain what that actually freaking means, even though it's a very integral part of the story and the world
Mhm.
setting. And two, as one of the commenters mentioned, that doesn't make sense, because if all of these people have been living together mixed up like this for 3,000 years, they would all look, Brazilian, or,
Yeah.
something. They would all have a very, you know, monotone look, because all of the differences would have been bred out.
Mhm. And then he brings up something with, I'm gonna have to watch the video. Apparently, there's a podcast or something with the
Mhm.
Dusty Wheel, and they explain. And in Jordan's notes, he talks about diversity of skin tone in the two rivers. And two things. First of all, there's a huge difference between what was in the notes and what actually was in the books.
Yeah.
And two, if that is, I'm actually curious, was that after Perrin took over, when all the refugees were coming in, where it actually does describe the two rivers as becoming a diverse the melting pot of all of these different cultures coming together, and actually describes the struggles of the local folk going through this? Or is that from the beginning?
Yeah.
Because from the beginning, he describes it as this little pocket of sheltered area that is almost separate from the rest of the world.
Yeah. And there is some difference, because there are three main towns, hamlets in the Two Rivers, and there is some talk in there that you can kind of tell who's from where. And now how much of that is like names, because everyone
Mhm.
over here is a large clan, everyone over here is a large clan, so you have
Or just
similar
who knows
names.
who. Yeah.
But again, if that is the case, and if there is some differences in skin tone there, again, that's just showing you how insular they are. Is that even within this insular place, they're still even more insular in their own hamlets.
Mhm.
And then it does mention that Terran Ferry, the fourth town, is kind of separate because it sits on the river, and that's where there's some trade with the rest of the world. That's where stuff comes in and out, and most people don't travel down deep into the Two Rivers. They just do their trading in Terran Ferry and then they leave. And those people aren't even considered Two Rivers folks because they've mixed with the outside world so much. So they may have a different look to them, which would make sense.
Well, even in the beginning of this book, when they're in Berlon, men can tell they're from the Two Rivers, and the whole time they're saying they're from that other town because it's the only one anybody would know. But the person that's from that town could tell they're not from there. So you even get that pretty early on in the books. And where's Min, first of all?
I saw her on when I was looking at IMDb, so she's there, but they've completely written out Berlon, so I'm not sure where they're going to put her. Maybe they meet her in Camelin. I don't know.
Which is messed up because she's somebody that shows up early and then
Yeah,
disappears for a long time and then comes back because of a certain thing about her. And yeah, I don't know how you put her in right now
and she's
without
really
just forcing
important.
the issue.
She's
Yeah.
really freaking important.
Yeah. uh, but yeah, on the whole skin tone thing, we can banter about what degree, what shade of gray we're in. But at the same time, there is no destroying our argument. The fact that the Two Rivers was very homogeneous, versus and Saldia was very homogeneous. Shiner was very homogeneous. One of the Aes Sedai in episode 4, she's from Shiner, but yet she's a black woman in the show. She's the one that died. She should look like Lan. It, it, this isn't me saying everybody should be white. She should be freaking Asian, right? But again, they just plug people into where they thought they should be in this story, and it is what it is. But yeah, that's so now we're specifically talking about the diversity and inclusion.
Speaking of diversity of looks, why isn't Atlanta prettier?
Yeah.
And this is actually a thing because again, because she's supposed to be a badass. Well, she is a badass, but she uses her look. It's commented on how beautiful she is, and
Mhm.
she uses that in a coquettish manner to get her way and to disarm people into thinking that she's just this pretty little lady when she's actually one of the stronger Aes Sedai. And since she's green, she's battle hardened. She knows her way around a fight.
Mhm.
And they didn't even try and do that.
Yeah.
And again, it matters because Jordan is very good at showing contrasts. And so later she's traveling with someone who's kind of frumpy, who's like uh, a little bit overweight, average looking librarian type,
Mhm.
who's constantly got ink smudges on her and her clothes are always a little bit disheveled. But again, that's part of that character. That's something of an act. No, that is an act because this character has a mind like a steel trap and is constantly weaving schemes and
Mhm.
thinking things through. And you can't do that. Or again, if you do, it's like Tom pointing out Matt's accent. The audience is going to look around and go, what the hell are you talking about? What accent?
Yeah. I'm wondering where they're going to write her in as well, even though yeah, she wouldn't have shown up in the books yet anyways. She doesn't show up
Yeah.
till book
2.
2.
She's in
Yeah.
book
And
2.
she's very integral in book 2.
Yeah.
But yeah,
I actually thought that was the until I realized, oh wait, she's green, is the Corinne. Was that who that was that died
mhm.
there? Yeah,
Who
she's
actually shows up in book 5
yeah.
as
Doesn't have a
kind of a
lot of
badass.
mention, but
Yeah.
is kind of
And
important for the short amount of time she's there.
they kind of butchered her name compared to what's in the spelling in the phonetics in the books, because I thought she was someone else. I thought she was a yellow from later
Mm.
that has a similar name. And then I saw the last name. I was like, oh, no, she was that green that was causing all the problems later on in the books. So I'm wondering if they really just thought, you know what, we might just get one season. Let's pack everything in. Because that's what it seems like at this point. Let's put everything in there we can in this first season, and if we get a second season, we'll just make it work.
I don't know, because it seems to me like so much of what they're doing is setting stuff up for later.
Well, you would hope so.
You would hope so, but that, to me, that's what I took all of this time with bringing in the Aes Sedai so early, expanding this low gain part, and all of this. I took that as world building and setting up Aes Sedai stuff that's going to happen later. But again, why you're one of the things I was pleased to see is a lot of the commenters on our last episode said they had not read the books, and I was trying to find someone to give me an objective view who hadn't read the books, because waifu kept accusing me of just being grumpy old nerd, and I hated it as much as I did because it was so different from the books. No, I've been purposely trying to point out objective things here, objective storytelling problems.
Well, there's two conflicting parts to that. Is yes, you and I have a very serious bias because we not only read but loved the books. So that is a serious bias. So any deviation from the books is already going to make us grumpy, right? But the second part is, why isn't that valid? Why is that so wrong that we wanted it to stick more to the books?
Because the books are a very well crafted story.
Well, and we're quite reasonable. Again, we can bring up past examples. Lord of the Rings. No, it wasn't 100% with the books. It was probably not even 70% with the books, but it did a damn good job of portraying them.
Yes, it was very faithful to the characters and to the story.
Mhm.
And of course, they cut a lot of stuff because they had to. But when they added stuff, it was like composite characters, or giving like I said, giving lines from these characters to this character because it made more sense there, and they wanted to expand the part of that character, and it made it flow better. But you still kept those lines, you still kept that story.
I just had a thought that made me chuckle a little bit. So you mentioned that they wanted to be the Game of Thrones for Wheel of Time, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, the problem with Game of Thrones was when it stuck closely to the books, it was awesome. And then when they ran out of book, it got crappy, season 4 and on.
Yeah.
So they are sticking to the Game of Thrones model. They just started at season 4. They just started at season 4 and just started winging it from the beginning.
And we mentioned in the last episode that, hey, maybe since they have the source material and they don't have to wait on an author who's never going to finish, that maybe it'll be better. No, it's worse than I thought.
All right, we got to start wrapping this up. Looks like we're only going to get Wheel of Time in this one.
And I could keep going. Ugh. I will mention two things, two thoughts I had is, there are examples of when this has been done very successfully. Harry Potter.
Yes. Probably the most successfully done.
And my take on Harry Potter is that it's simply a companion to the books, especially the first couple of movies. I watched the first movie, or maybe the first two. I think I watched them on a plane though, so um, I didn't get it, and I couldn't follow it that well. And then I read the books, and then I could follow the movies a lot better. But it didn't matter because the books were so popular that even if you didn't get it, if you hadn't read the books, there were so many people that had read the books and you were doing a very faithful adaptation of them that you had a huge audience, huge audience. So you could just stick to the books and say, look, if you don't get it because, there are gaps here or there are things, yeah, just stick with us, follow along, and you'll get it. The other example I had is I was actually gonna go back and watch Game of Thrones in preparation for this, but I didn't have to because I went and watched Dune, and it
The
made me
new
mad
one?
too. Yeah, it made me mad too because Frank Herbert's world is, at least you could make an argument, more confusing and convoluted than the Wheel of Time world. And they didn't have a whole series. They just had 2.5 hours for half a book, and yet you could follow it.
Mhm.
And I don't know the source material there, so I was able to be the objective looking, looking of well, I haven't read these books, I don't know all this stuff, and yet you could follow it. The people I went with, they could follow it. They were able to simplify and streamline the story without just going off on a tangent. It is faithful to the story of the books, just condensed and shown in a way that you get all these story points and you get the feeling of this world very faithfully. So it can be done, but not by these people.
Well, and you look at it, it's going to be 6 hour long episodes, so 6 hours of film time. And then you look at the Lord of the Rings, that's the first two movies, is 6 hours. It can be done. We have precedent. With Harry Potter, that would be the first three movies. It can be done, and that's just book one. You could have done 6 episodes, book one, and done it right with the right character development. But it's just everything and I think part of the problem is they are including so much stuff from the later books that they're packing stuff in there that doesn't belong.
And I think one of the other commenters mentioned this too, is because of that, you're not getting a connection with these characters.
No.
I mean, just take parents. So, why you gave him a wife so that you could kill her? So what? Because you never gave us enough there that we cared.
Mm-hmm.
There's no connection with these characters.
Yeah, they mentioned he's married at the table. And then they show her working in the forge when the Trollocs attack, and he goes back and fights Trollocs and kills her. That's all we got.
Yeah.
In fact, you had to really be like, that was his wife, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I was really confused because what? Perrin has a wife, and I thought maybe Matt was just joking.
Yeah, I actually rewound that scene to see if I heard it the way I heard it like 4 times. Be like,
Yeah.
No. All right, we got to wrap this up. We'll, I guess, watch episode 5 before we do another one, and keep giving our reviews. So, like, share, subscribe. We got what, 4 or 5 new subscribers from that last episode. So, woohoo! We're a quarter of a way to 100, which is a tenth of a way to 1,000, which we can monetize. So a quarter of a way to a tenth of a way, and we're there.
Go us.
Yeah, of course we won't be monetized because we talk too much about COVID, but that's okay because we're having fun. It helps us be grumpy out loud.
All right.
Go
away now.
Yeah, I will see you later, and we will get to the next time we record. I guess we got to talk about my trip to fascist Germany, and Yeah. And what else were NFL complaints or
Yeah,
bitching
yeah,
and moaning. Yeah.
yeah. You missed some really annoying football over the weekend.
Well,
I wouldn't say
the
you
Pokes
missed
one,
it, but yeah, yeah.
the Pokes one. Of course, the annoying part's going to be if Alabama beats Georgia, then they're going to just flip them in spots and have two SEC teams in the playoff,
Of
and
course they will.
Oklahoma State will be sitting at number 5. So we need Georgia to win, and we need Cincinnati to win, or Cincinnati to lose, UH to win. So if we get those two things and the Pokes win, then they'll be in. If those two things don't happen and the Pokes win, then they could be looking on the outside.
Oh, they will be. That's the way it works. All
Because
right.
Cincinnati's a Cinderella story, and SEC always gets put in there. But
One more reason for me to be grumpy.
all right, I'll talk to you later.
Later.